My neighbor accused me of neglect, then invited me for coffee and left a camera on the table. She stormed across my lawn, fingernails digging into her phone, and pointed at my front door like I owed her something. She said my kids were always outside unsupervised and that I never watched them. She told me other neighbors were worried. I was sweaty from mowing and had smoothie in one hand and a toddler on my hip. 2 days later, she knocked again, smiling like nothing happened, and asked if we could talk over coffee. She set a paper cup on my kitchen counter and said she wanted to clear the air. I said, fine, sit down. She kept her purse on her lap and she kept looking at the living room where my kids were coloring. Then she said she'd been worried for months and that someone should do something. I asked what she meant. She said the kids were left alone too long, that they played in the yard by themselves, and that it wasn't safe. My mouth went dry. She asked if I would let her put a small camera on my table so she could record what she called a few minutes of normal to prove nothing was wrong. I said that was weird. She laughed and said it was just for her peace of mind, that she was a nurse and loved kids, and that people in the neighborhood had been talking. Then she placed a small black cylinder on my coffee table like it belonged there. I told her I didn't want a camera in my house. She waved her hand and said it would only be there for an hour. She said she trusted me, but her husband worried and she wanted evidence to show them I was okay. I let her leave it because it felt easier than fighting in front of my kids. 20 minutes after she walked out, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from the neighborhood group chat with a cropped screenshot of the camera on my table and a message saying, finally someone recorded how unsafe my house was. The screenshot was already tagged to 5 other neighbors. My stomach dropped. I called her. She answered in a calm voice and said she was just helping. She said she would delete the footage after she watched it. I told her to bring it over then. She said she already uploaded it to the neighborhood page and to a private parenting group. She said she would remove it if I asked nicely. I asked her to come over. She agreed. She came back smiling with an iced coffee and sat like nothing was wrong. Then 2 men in plain clothes walked up my driveway. They said they were from child welfare and they needed to speak with me about concerns reported by a neighbor. I laughed at first because it had to be a joke. I wasn't on a watch list. My kids had clean clothes and a vegetable drawer in the fridge. They asked me if my children had ever been left unattended for long periods. I felt my throat close. I said no, explained our schedule, said my toddler had nap times, that my older kid went to after-school care. They wrote things down and asked to see my phone for contact numbers. One officer asked if he could see the footage that had been posted. I thought if she had footage, it would show the kids playing quietly. I told them to wait. The neighbor promised to show it. She handed over her phone with the screen bright and a 10-second clip ready to play. On the clip, I looked like I was scrolling on my phone. The kids were in the background. A little ways from me by the sliding door, building a block tower. The clip was grainy but framed, so my back was to the kids and my face was visible. The caption the neighbor typed under the clip called the scene neglect. The parenting group had exploded with comments within minutes. Someone had already messaged CPS with the link. The officer asked if they could take a copy. I said yes. I asked them to watch the entire clip. They did. They nodded and asked about my parenting plan. They left with cards and instructions to be available for follow-up. Then a social worker called. She said they were opening a case and would visit in 2 days. I felt sick and angry and small all at once. I knew the clip was a sliver of a moment. I knew I had been in the kitchen less than 3 minutes making PB&J because the toddler wanted crust cut off. But the internet didn't care about context. That night my phone blew up. Neighbors sent messages asking if I had lost control of my kids. Someone asked if the baby had ever been left outside alone. Someone else threatened to call the police again if I didn't shape up. My mother texted asking if I was okay. I erased the drafts of responses that wanted to tell everyone where to shove their judgment. The next morning, 2 detectives showed up. They asked for full copies of any video in my house. I told them I had a doorbell camera that recorded a timestamp. I handed over my footage. On my doorbell camera, I watched the neighbor arrive, smile, come inside, place the camera, and leave. The doorbell footage showed I had put the toddler in the high chair, sliced apples, and tucked the block set a few feet away while I grabbed a dish towel. The whole sequence lasted under 3 minutes. Then I watched the neighbor's footage again on her phone. Her clip started when my back was turned and ended before I turned back. She had cut out the part where I turned, handed the toddler an apple, scraped jam off my hands, and kissed my kid on the forehead. People saw neglect. Detectives saw selective editing. One detective asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint about the neighbor staging this. My first instinct was to scream that she had invaded my home and manipulated footage. My second instinct was to protect my kids from more scrutiny. I filed a complaint. She denied wrongdoing to detectives. She said she had only meant to make sure the kids were safe. She said she feared for them and that she did what any concerned person would do. A week later, a local parenting blogger picked up the original posted clip and ran a story about alarmed neighbors and busy parents ignoring their kids. My inbox filled with judgment from strangers who assumed the worst without checking facts. Then the school called. They said anyone reported for neglect would be flagged and someone from school services would have to check in to ensure the kids' safety. I got an email from HR at my job saying they had been contacted about the allegations and wanted to know if I needed leave. At work, my boss looked at me like she was waiting for me to confess. I stopped answering the door to salesmen. I stopped posting photos of my family because I didn't want more ammunition. The social worker visited and sat at my kitchen table with a stack of pamphlets about parenting classes. She listened and asked calm questions. She said the clip raised concerns because it showed a parent out of frame and children seemingly unattended. I showed her my doorbell footage. I showed her timestamps on my phone proving I had been in and out of the kitchen. I showed her a receipt from the grocery store proving I'd been there earlier with both kids in the cart. She nodded and said she appreciated the evidence. But she also said she had to follow procedure and do periodic home visits for the next month. She explained the goal was safety and not punishment. I tried to breathe through it. My older kid asked why someone had said mean things about us. I said it was because adults sometimes forget to be kind. That night, the neighbor left a note under my door saying she was glad we were getting help and that she hoped I would be a better parent. I kept the note and put it in a drawer. I started keeping receipts, appointment records, anything that could prove presence. I saved texts from my babysitter and the after-school program. I screenshot timestamps on an app showing when I picked up my kids. Then I found out the neighbor had a history. An old tenant 2 doors down told me she had a habit of watching families and complaining once a season. Another neighbor said she'd had an argument with the woman 2 years ago over yard decorations and that the neighbor had sworn she'd get them back by exposing bad parenting. I printed statements from neighbors who vouched for me. I hired a lawyer because the neighborhood posts weren't just gossip anymore. They had become evidence that could start a paper trail damaging my kids. The lawyer told me about defamation and illegal recording. She said the neighbor's camera was inside my home without consent, and that posting edited clips designed to deceive could be actionable. I felt a strange relief having someone speak legal words into the room. We filed a restraining request to prevent the neighbor from approaching my house or posting about my family online. The court granted a temporary order while evaluating the case. She responded by posting the same clip again with a longer caption and a plea for others to watch their kids. The county sheriff called to ask what I wanted done. The lawyer said file criminal complaints for recording inside a private home, for harassment, and for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I did. Because she had left the camera in my house, the police obtained the device and sent it to forensics. Forensics found the original file on the device and a second file on her cloud account that matched the posted clip. The metadata proved the posted version had been trimmed. They found messages on her phone to other neighbors asking if they would share the clip if she uploaded it. They found a draft message she wrote that said she hoped the shock value would force social services to act. It was ugly proof. It was also what I needed. Court dates were scheduled, social services completed the series of home checks and eventually closed the case, filing that there was no evidence of neglect. But the online story lingered. The parenting blog kept the archived screenshots. Someone had screen recorded the neighborhood post the first time, and it lived in dozens of caches. The stress of the last 2 months made my hair fall out in clumps. I cried in the shower and woke up in the night checking the baby monitor like a reflex. Then my lawyer called with the hearing date for the defamation case. I prepared a folder with my doorbell footage, receipts, neighbor statements, and the forensic report showing the edited clip. On the morning of the hearing, the neighbor sat across from me in court, looked composed and black. Her attorney argued she was a concerned citizen acting in good faith. My lawyer laid out the facts, the trimmed clip, the uploaded caption, the cloud backup proving she had edited it before posting, the messages requesting others share it. The forensics tech explained the metadata. The judge looked through the evidence and then said the neighbor had knowingly posted material to mislead and that her behavior went beyond protected speech. The court ordered her to remove all posts, to issue a public apology, and to pay damages for legal fees and emotional distress. The court also ordered the neighbor to attend anger management and to avoid my property permanently. She stared at me when the judge handed down the ruling. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. The judge's order couldn't take back the nights I cried or the days my toddler asked why someone didn't like us. After court, I walked home and found a dozen messages from people I'd never met saying they were sorry and that they'd seen the clip and had jumped to conclusions. I blocked dozens of numbers. My kids came home from my mom's that afternoon. We ate cereal on the couch and watched cartoons. I felt like I was moving through syrup, but I was moving. The neighbor did post the apology the court ordered. It was awkward and mechanical and didn't feel sincere, but it was there, and the post came down. A month later, I found out she had violated the restraining order by walking near my mailbox. The police fined her and noted the violation on her record. Life slowly rebalanced. I stopped going on neighborhood chats. I invested in a second doorbell camera and a nanny cam I controlled. I kept meticulous records of schedules and receipts. People still whispered sometimes. An aunt posted a passive-aggressive comment tagging the original blog. A kid at school asked my older child if his mom was the one from the video. I taught my kids to say that mom keeps us safe and that sometimes adults make mistakes. They rolled their eyes like kids do and went back to building Lego towers. The thing I didn't expect was how much the experience changed the way I trusted people. I started locking my front door, not out of fear of a break-in, but because the neighbor had shown how close the line between public and private could feel. I stopped waving to everyone at the bus stop. I answered fewer invites for coffee. I said no a lot, and saying no felt like stretching a muscle that had atrophied. My mother called one day and asked if I was okay. I told her that I was learning to pick my battles and to protect my family first. She said maybe she should have listened to me before. I said maybe. We didn't talk about it much after. 6 months later, a small local outlet did a follow-up. They interviewed me briefly and ran a short piece about online shaming and the need for context. The piece didn't go viral. It didn't need to. I didn't want the spotlight anymore. What mattered was that CPS had closed the file, that my job didn't fire me, that my kids were healthy and still trusted me to make PB&J, and that a judge had said what everyone else refused to say for me. You don't get to plant cameras in someone's home and call it community policing. Once, After bedtime, my oldest asked why the neighbor had done that. I told him I didn't know. He said, "It's weird because we always wave and she waves back." I said, "People act for complicated reasons and sometimes they make bad choices." He shrugged and asked if I would ever let someone put a camera in our house again. I said no, and he nodded, like that was obvious. A year later, the neighbor moved away. I heard it from someone walking their dog. They said the woman had sold the house and left town. Part of me felt relieved, like a weight had lifted. Part of me felt sorry, because whatever drove her to that point was probably ugly and painful. I didn't post about it. The last time I saw the neighborhood parenting group was a screenshot on an article about online mob behavior. It had a short paragraph about context and then a line about my case as an example. I closed the tab and went to make cookies. I still locked the doors and checked the monitors, but I also started saying yes to things again. I took my kids to the park without calculating how long I'd be out. I let them run ahead a little while. I waited on a bench. Once, someone I didn't know complimented how calm my kids looked playing together. I smiled and said thanks. I didn't explain anything. If you ask me now what changed, I would say practical things. Better cameras, legal counsel, a quiet house rule about who comes in. But mostly it was that I stopped giving strangers power over my life. I still didn't trust everyone. I still watched my neighborhood like it was a street built from glass. But my kids were safe. The camera left on my table was evidence in a case file now, not proof of who I was. I still can't believe how fast strangers judged. I still can't believe how a tiny device made a storm. My kids color by the sliding door these days. I make lunch without feeling watched. The apology sits in a court document, and the neighbor's cloud account was closed. I still don't know if I will ever feel completely okay about what happened. But my kids were home, and the cameras that mattered were the ones I controlled.